Welcome to Module 3, Part 3. Let's now discuss risk in detail. We have seen that risk is when the threat is exploited, the vulnerability. The risk level varies when we combine the impact parameters. The risk elements. It is important to understand the elements of risk. Threats, vulnerabilities, exposure, risk, safeguard, and assets are the major elements. Assets are endangered by the threats. Assets are endangered by the threats. When the threat is exploited with the vulnerability, it results in exposure, which is a risk. Threat is maybe somebody outside the office, some robbers or thieves. Vulnerability can be that there is no lock for the door. So this is a weakness. There is no lock for the door is a weakness, and people out there on the street, they can come and steal something. That is a threat. And when the threat is combined with the vulnerability, that results in exposure, which is a risk of the assets. Now, when the threat is exploited with the vulnerability, it results in exposure of the very sensitive data and credentials also in the real time. This exposure is a risk to the organization. And in order to safeguard these assets, we need to find out ways and means to provide the safeguard. So the assets are endangered by the threats. And the threats and vulnerabilities, when combined, it results in exposure, which is a risk for the assets. In order to safeguard the assets, we need to provide safeguards. What is risk? There are certain terminologies we are going to understand here. Threat, a potentially negative occurrences. We have already seen this. Vulnerability is a weakness in the system. Risk, a matched threat and vulnerability. The vulnerability and the threat should match. It should combine. Only then the risk will happen. To have risk, a threat must connect to the vulnerability. Risk is threat multiplied by vulnerability, sometimes impact. Safeguard, a measure taken to reduce the risk. Total cost of ownership is the total cost of the safeguard. You have a laptop or a desktop, and in this, if you want to install an encryption software, the encryption software cost will be there. The software cost, annual maintenance, installation costs, everything put together, you will get an X amount. This is the TCO, total cost of ownership. The return on investment is the money saved by deploying the safeguard. We always must look for positive return of investment. If it results in negative return of investment, it is a very poor choice. Risk analysis. Accurate risk analysis is critical skill for an information security professional. Our risk decisions will dictate which safeguard we deploy to protect our assets. What is this risk decisions? The accuracy of the risk analysis will help us to take the decisions that will dictate which safeguard we deploy to protect our assets. And the amount of money and resources we spend on. Amount of money here, as an information security professional, you must be able to put the facts and figures, reasons, and justification before the top management to get the approval for the funding, in order to get approval for the investment for the safeguards. Poor decisions will result in wasted money or even worse, compromised data. So we need to have a very smart decision. So risk analysis is very important, and it is really a tough job. Risk related concept. These are the concepts very important to understand basically as to risk related concepts. Asset value. The asset value is the value of the asset you are trying to protect. Everything will have a value. Exposure factor is the percentage of value of an asset. What is the percentage? Say for example, a laptop is 25,000 rupees. If you lost the laptop, that means you lost 25,000, which means 100% you lost. That 100%, the percentage, that is what is exposure factor. Single loss of expectancy. The single loss of expectancy, or SLE, is the cost of a single loss. SLE is the asset value, AV, times the exposure factor. Annual rate of occurrence is how many times it occurred in a year. It is an approximate figure only. We have to take an average only in the ARO. The annual rate of occurrence is the number of losses you suffer per year. Suppose you lost the laptop 1 per month. That means the ARO will be 12. That means 12 months. Suppose if once in 2 months if you lose a laptop, the ARO will be 6. Annualized loss of expectancy is ALE, is your yearly cost due to a risk. It is calculated by multiplying the SLE, single loss of expectancy, times the annual rate of occurrence. Let me explain this a little bit detail so that you'll be able to understand it perfectly. Let's take this as an example. You have the asset value of the laptop. Say for example, you have 2,500 rupees a laptop cost. And you have about 22,500 rupees worth of data. This is the worth of data. This is the data. 22,500. I just wanted to figure it out 25,000 totally. That's why. Okay, that's why 25,000. It's roughly for an example. So 25,000 rupees is the cost of one laptop. Suppose if this laptop is lost, you lost 100%. This is the exposure factor. So exposure factor is 100% if you lose a laptop. And it is not 25,000 rupees, it is the percentage. Exposure factor always mentioned by the percentage. Now, the single loss of expectancy, SLE, is nothing but the single loss. If the laptop is stolen, that means you lost the hardware, you lost the data also. That means your single loss will be 25,000 rupees. So SLE is 25,000. So asset value is 25,000 rupees and exposure factor is 100%. And SLE is single loss of expectancy is 25,000. Now we need ARO. ARO is annual rate of occurrence. How many times the theft can occur in a year? If it is 12, if it is 1 per month, it is 12. Let's say, for example, 11 times in a year, and 11 times in a year, on an average, there will be theft. Now we need to calculate the ALE. ALE is annual loss of expectancy. Annual loss is what? The SLE multiplied by ARO. SLE multiplied by single loss is 25,000 multiplied by 11 times. That means annual loss of expectancy, that is 2,75,000. That means the AV, asset value is 25,000, exposure factor is 100%, SLE is 25,000 and ARO is 11 times, and the ALE, annual loss of expectancy, is 25,000 into 11 times 2,75,000. This is what it is. So without any safeguard, if your laptop is lost per year, your annual loss of expectancy is 2,75,000 rupees. Now you provide a software, you provide a safeguard, because this asset has to be safeguarded, you install an encryption software. You have installed it. That means what? You have safeguarded this 22,500. Now, under this condition, after this, if your laptop is stolen, that means you will lose only the hardware cost 2,500. This you will not lose, which means you will lose only 2,500 rupees. That means nothing but 10% because the exposure factor is reduced here. Let us write it here. Again, asset value is again the same thing, 25,000. Exposure factor is 10%. It got reduced because we provided safeguard. Single loss of expectancy is not 25,000 rupees. It's only 2,500 rupees because it's only 10% of the asset value. Now the ARO, if it is 11 times the same thing per year, your ALE will be 27,500, not 2,75,500. So if you spend about 5,000 rupees for the mitigation, then spending over an X amount, this is again a question because the X amount is the TCO, okay? TCO, that means the software cost, the installation cost, the manpower cost, the maintenance and everything put together is your TCO. If your TCO is 5,000, that means by spending 5,000, you saved a lot of money here, 2,75,000. Otherwise, you will lose if 11 times occurred, and here it is 27,500 only. And this calculation is only for you to understand the concepts. There are a lot of things you need to understand in the risk calculation. Let's go back to the slides. Now let us go through this once again. The asset value is the value of the asset you are trying to protect, that is the 25,000 rupees in our example. The exposure factor or EF is the percentage of value an asset lost due to an incident. If it is lost without the encryption, 100% is the lost percentage. Single loss of expectancy is the cost of single loss. SLE is the asset value times exposure factor. If the exposure factor is 100%, 25,000. If the exposure factor is 10, 2,500, like that. Annual rate of occurrence. Annual rate of occurrence is the number of losses you suffer per year. That is 11 times we have taken in that example. ARO is 11 times. Annualized loss of expectancy is ALE is your yearly cost due to a risk. It is calculated by multiplying the SLE times ARO. Single loss of expectancy 25,000 into ARO, annual rate of occurrence, is 11. So 25,000 into 11, 2,75,000 without the encryption. But with the encryption, single loss of expectancy is 2,500 with 11 times 27,500. So when you provide the safeguard, the annualized loss of expectancy will get reduced because the exposure factor drastically reduced in the risk calculation after mitigation. Return on investment. The return on investment is the amount of money saved by implementing a safeguard. If your total cost of ownership, that entire cost of providing the safeguard, is less than your ALE, annualized loss of expectancy, you have a positive return on investment and have made a good choice. If the total cost of ownership, if the TCO is higher than your ALE, you have made a poor choice. To summarize this, you have a laptop and the laptop cost 25,000 rupees and you need a lock. If the lock cost more than 25,000 rupees, it is a bad choice. If it is less than 25,000 rupees, much lower, then it is a good choice, positive return on investment. Let's now move to the concept challenge. There are 10 questions this time. Question number 1. Potential occurrence that can have an undesired effect on the system. Threat. Question number 2. Falsified identity or deliberately changing the parameters is known as spoofing. Question number 3. The ability of a user or an attacker to deny having performed an action or activity. Repudiation. Question number 4. An ordinary user can become an administrator by doing this. Privilege escalation. Question number 5. An umbrella term used to refer to a wide range of intrusive or disruptive type of software. Malware. Question number 6. An unauthorized person enters the building or gate close behind an authorized person. Tailgating. Question number 7. Destruction, alteration, and disclosure DAD occurs when one of the components of dash is compromised. CIA triad, one of the components of the CIA triad is compromised. Question number 8. In order to mitigate a risk, we provide safeguards. The entire cost of providing such safeguard is known as total cost of ownership, otherwise TCO. Question number 9. Single loss of expectancy SLE times the ARO, annual rate of occurrence. SLE multiplied by ARO is what? Annualized loss of expectancy. Question number 10. The amount of money saved by implementing a safeguard. Return on investment. I strongly encourage that you repeat the class if you don't understand. If you want to refresh more, you can just go through this once again. Thank you for watching. Let's move on to module 4.